Hello, friends, and welcome to Backstage with Gig Performer. My name is Brett Pontecorvo, and we are here every single Thursday at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time, live streaming. And today we have a really interesting episode. So, a while back on the Gig Performer blog, uh, co-founder David Jameson wrote about how you can use a particular program called SampleRobot to get sounds out of other programs and into Kontakt or into a sampler of your choice so that you can use them um, inside of Gig Performer. And the process is actually pretty easy. Now, there are a couple of little things you have to be aware of when you're doing it. And so that is what we are going to be walking through today. But if you're watching right now, can you go ahead and let me know in the comments, have you sampled before? Have you pulled sounds out of some other performance software, perhaps out of Ableton or Mainstage, and brought them into Kontakt? Is this something that you're familiar with? Let us know. Glenn says he was here first today. Welcome, Glenn. We're so happy to have you here. Ray Myers, former Backstage guest. Thanks so much for being here, Ray. We're happy to have you. Michelle, you'll have to give me a pronunciation tutorial on this one. All right, so friends, we are going to start popping into today's material. I've only sampled some small sound effects, one note only. Yeah, so there's very many levels of depth that you could go into when you are sampling, but we want to talk about maybe first why you might want to sample. Because believe it or not, you may be sampling for a host of different reasons. One of the reasons you might want to sample is if you are trying to get your sounds out of a program like we were mentioning earlier. But this might not actually be the only reason. You can certainly create a sampled instrument from something that actually exists in the real world. So you have some sort of a piece of hardware, perhaps a hardware keyboard, or even just like a good old instrument that you wanted to sample that you might want to put into Kontakt, although SampleRobot probably wouldn't be your best bet for that. Or perhaps you have hardware keyboard, or alternatively, you have a very large set. Like perhaps, it's just so big and you're wanting to save resource. And this is a really good way to go about doing that. So Ray is saying that his sounds are 75% sampled, which is very, very, it's a lot of sounds. And Ray actually was one of the people that kind of clued me into how powerful this could be. I used a Chord Kronos and couldn't find the sound easily in one of my VST plugins. Yeah, I think this is a super common thing. All right, so let's go ahead and pop over to our other page here. Okay, so here is screen 2. And what you see right now on my screen is Ableton. And I have a sound here that is just very simple sound. And I'll play it for you. I actually cannot hear this, but you will be able to hear it on the stream. Okay. So this is just a pad sound. Okay, so it's not super complex, but perhaps there is a scenario in which you may want to get this sound out. You might want this sound to be inside of Kontakt or inside of something else. And if that's the case, then we are going to build a setup right now using SampleRobot to make that happen. So I'm going to go ahead and open up SampleRobot right now. Now, this, of course, could work with hardware, but right now I'm doing it in the context of software because for most of what I like to do or want to do or need to do, I try and stay inside of the box. I like to go to a gig with my laptop and just plug it into whatever is there and have it play, and Gig Performer makes that very easy to do. Okay, so what you'll find when you open up SampleRobot is that it really walks you through the process in a way where if you are unfamiliar with sampling or you're kind of new to the world, you're a little bit unsure, it is easy to make it work, which is really important because, well, yeah, we don't want to spend a ton of time sampling. We want to get to playing music, which is one of the things Gig Performer stands on. And I think SampleRobot really aligns in that thought process. So they do make it pretty easy. So you're going to see here this introduction is going to pop on and it's going to say, hey, welcome to the project Wizard. What would you like to do? Here's your checklist, right? Connect your instrument to a sound card, and we're already in the box, so we don't have to worry about that. Check your MIDI channel. So we're just going to go through this wizard kind of one step at a time here. Now, I like the automatic recording function because it does the work for you, which is kind of the pro to doing this. You could certainly sample manually, but in this case, that's not really ideal. So the title of this preset is called Dark Swarm. So I'm going to go ahead and name that Dark Swarm _ live stream, so I know when I did this. I'm going to click next. Now it's going to ask you where you want to put your samples. And for me, the default path didn't make a ton of sense. I wanted to have it set up. So in their preferences, there's a way that you can change what the default is. So I've got this moved now over to my external hard drive. So I'm going to click next here. And now this is a super important setting. This is SampleRobot asking you, where do you want me to listen for these sounds? So I'm going to choose Black Hole 64 channel. Now, this one slipped by me several times. So at the bottom here, it's going to ask, where is your left and where is your right? Now, SampleRobot does see all of the channels, but SampleRobot names channel 1 channel 0. So we have to do a little bit of math here, not terribly difficult. Let's pop over momentarily to Ableton, and we're going to check now our audio settings. So you can see that my audio output device is Black Hole. We'll pop over to our output configuration here to just make sure we have a host of channels turned on. Now, because we're live streaming and the audio routing for a live stream is unbelievable, you wouldn't even begin to believe it. We're going to choose channels 17 and 18 for our outputs, which will mean during this sampling process, you will not hear these samples, nor will I. But the benefit of doing it this way is that you will also not hear me talking when we load these samples into Kontakt. So that can be a bit distracting. So we've got 17 and 18 here, which means inside of SampleRobot, we will need to have it set to 16 and 17. Okay, so we'll pop over and hit next. This is going to ask you what format you would like to record in. I'm going to leave this at the default recommendation, 44:1 stereo 16-bit. If you have a strong preference about that, you can go ahead and change it. MIDI out devices. So this is where SampleRobot is asking you, where should I send MIDI data in order to create some sort of a sound? And so if you are running a Mac, you can turn on your IAC driver. And if you want details on that, you can check out how to do that in the blog that David wrote a bit back, sometime in August. But IAC driver for Mac. If you're on Windows, there are other options for you. I know Loop MIDI is one that people use and seem to like. So it will still work for you. Now it's asking you for MIDI channels and MIDI programs. I don't want a MIDI program change to be sent, but in testing, this did not really affect the process. So I'm going to just leave it. We'll go here to next. Now this is going to ask you the range that you want sampled. So since we are live streaming on the internet as we speak, I'm going to choose 37 keys. But if you need a larger sample than that, you can choose a bigger sample. So we'll hit next here. Velocity layers. So this is how detailed you want SampleRobot to be. So if you need to do a lot of velocity layers, it'll automatically do this for you. However, you have to consider what you really need in a live performance situation. You might not need that many velocity layers to get a convincing sample. You might be just fine with one layer or even two layers. So for this case, I am going to go ahead and use two velocity layers. Okay, key steps are the differences or the distances rather between each interval. So for example, if I have 6, it's going to sample out a tritone interval every time it goes through. If you want larger, you can go larger. If you want smaller, you can go smaller. Again, for the sake of time here, I am going to set this to 15. So if you're looking for a really detailed version of your things being resampled out, you can set your key step to 1. And you'll get each and every individual note sampled. But Kontakt does a pretty good job of stretching those pitches. Okay, so note length, how long do you want the note to sound and be recorded for, and how long do you want the release to be recorded for? So I actually found that these recommendations were very accurate. However, this is a very long sounding pad. So I am going to set this pad for 25 seconds. And I'll set this release length for 10 because the decay is long. And then I'm going to click next. Okay, so here's what's interesting. SampleRobot will set your loops, but you need to be intentional about if you want to use them or not. So Native Instruments no longer supports one of the file formats that SampleRobot outputs at. The name is skipping my mind right now. It's like a .sfx, but you'll see it in a minute. So if you're planning to move to Kontakt, which I'm going to mostly demo in Kontakt today, there's no real reason to turn auto loop on because you're not going to get much benefit from it. However, if you are using other samplers, and there are many, there's a huge list, which I'll show you in a moment here, then it is definitely worth turning it on because all of those markers, all of those points are going to be brought over into your sampler. So it's a lot less work for you on the other side of things if you just turn it on, because SampleRobot is pretty intelligent about where it places things, and it does allow you to edit things and all of that. But I'm going to turn auto loop on for now. And the reason that I'm going to do that is because after I show how Kontakt works, I'm going to show what this is like pulling this into the NNXT sampler that comes with Reason racks. And when you do that, all of these parameters that SampleRobot downloads will appear. So it can be really helpful to have that information. Okay, so let's click the next button. Okay, so this is going to ask you how complicated is your sound. So I'm going to choose complex because this is a pretty complicated sound. We'll hit next. So I have tested all of these loop starts and stops, and the results that I've got have all been very similar. So I'm going to leave it at 50% because it seems like that's the recommendation, but I guess my experience has been that none of these are really bad. They're all just kind of depends on what you need. Okay, so we're going to click finish. Now, if anything has gone correctly here right now, when I click start recording, what you're going to get is a very silent version of recording SampleRobot in the background, and I'll pop over to Kontakt and talk about some other things. Important to point out here, I think SampleRobot does kind of a cool job of showing you which keys will be sampled. It's kind of a nice feature. All right, here we go, friends. Okay, so while this is loading, let me pop back over here. And we're going to talk about Kontakt versus other samplers. So I'm actually going to pull Gig Performer on the screen right now. And you'll actually see, reshare the screen here. SampleRobot's now going in and trying to detect these loops. Okay, so here we go. Kontakt does a pretty good job of letting you create a new instrument. And when you come over here to this guy here, it just lets you pick a new instrument. And for a long time, I didn't even know that this was a thing that we had access to. But Kontakt truly is just a way that you can go in here and drop samples across a keyboard and then modulate them as you choose. I'm getting a notification here that perhaps SampleRobot has indeed finished. Okay. Oh, it's still working. Okay. So here are our keys and all of that good stuff. And I'm going to come over here to the side while SampleRobot is working. And earlier today, I did some samples. So I'm going to show you what this looks like inside. Whew, click on the wrong screen. I'm going to show you what this looks like inside of Kontakt. So what we have here is all of the things that I have sampled so far. Now, in previous versions of Kontakt, you're able to bring in all of the extra data that comes along inside of SampleRobot, but the newer versions of Kontakt don't allow this. Got a question coming in from Michael. I see 3 versions of SampleRobot on their website. Do you need Pro to do this, or can you go with one of the others? You can certainly go with one of the others. Actually, the middle of the lane one, the one that is in the middle, I guess there are 3 packages, is the most reasonably priced and allows you to have the full functionality of exporting your sounds. So I think that's a really good option if you're trying to do some sampling. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull in some stuff here. So in the left-hand corner, I've got this long looping pad, and you'll see that SampleRobot has done a good job exporting things with intelligent naming. So it says here the title of your pad, long looping pad, your velocity, 127 and 63. So in this particular version of looping things through, I did 2 velocities. And when I drag these in, I can put them wherever I want, but you don't actually have to worry too much about where you put them, because inside of Kontakt, there's this button that says auto. And if you right mouse click on this, it's going to give you options for an auto map setup. And what it does is it analyzes the title of these pads and it lets you tell Kontakt where to put things and why. So this saying make this a root key is good, but I actually like to set this to a single key because we can spread them out accordingly as we want, but we want to make sure that the sampled sound lives on the key that we set it to. So I'll hit apply. Oop. Okay. So this is finished. So I'm going to go ahead and save this dark swarm from the live stream. Okay. So I am going to, oops, we got stuck in the middle here. Apply, close. Okay. So you'll see now these samples that I dragged in live on one key. Now I could come in here and just fill in these gaps. There is a way to do that in an automated fashion, but it's not so hard to just drag them. Now, here's something to think about, which I'm going to show you is let's say you decided you wanted to do a really detailed sample where you're dealing with 188 different 188. You're dealing with full 88 different samples and you need certain features to be present when you do it, right? If that indeed is the case, it could be a lot of work to have to set your loop start stop and all of that stuff. But there's actually it's not hidden, but it's not the most intuitive. There is a way to do it inside of Kontakt that will allow you to actually set the loop start and stop inside of Kontakt and copy it and paste it over to all of your samples. So let's have a look here at how to do this. First of all, let's close this temporarily. So here's my Kontakt instrument, which will open back up in a moment. So I'm connecting this to 2 different places, and that's just so everybody can hear. So you'll hear there's some cutting in and out that's happening, but we're going to fix that here. So if we scroll down, we can pop over to the wave editor. Okay. And the wave editor looks like this. It's got a big picture of your wave, which this particular sample was 25 seconds long. So we at least we have a lot to work with. And then down here, there's a little button that says sample loop. So if you go ahead and turn that on, you're going to be given some different options. Now, right now, the loop start is at 0, but we don't want that because the loop start is not supposed to start at the beginning. We don't want the attack to be there, and we'll choose loop end. Now, I have found that a longer loop is generally an easier loop to work with. I don't know that there's a hard and fast rule to this. Again, I'm going to show you in a moment in the NNXT sampler within Reason. SampleRobot has done all of this work for you. If you're working in Kontakt, though, pulling these over takes a little bit of intentionality. So let's go ahead and test now if this has actually worked. So here's this. Let's make sure that I'm triggering there. And you'll see now this line is showing what's playing. And we'll just have a listen and see if we like what we're hearing. Yeah, so to me, that sounds just fine. It really does work well enough, and so we're going to roll with it. But we now need to get this sample to all of the other samples. So you'll see right now, everything is blue. So I'm going to select it all, but I'm going to make sure that I have the sample that I want to copy selected. And if I click this gear icon, it's going to give me some options here. So you see it says to all selected zones. I'm going to copy the current loop settings to all selected zones. This process makes some time. Please do not force quit the application. So I guess I assume that it does take some time. However, when I've been testing this, it actually doesn't take that much time. So perhaps if you're working with like a lot of different, stuff, it will take more time. But I found that this is actually quite snappy. So now you'll see if I click this first one here, my loop setting is good. My second one, my loop setting is good. And my third one, my loop setting is good. Now, I want to pop back over momentarily to SampleRobot because we're going a little bit of out of order here. So SampleRobot is now asking me where I want to save these samples. So I'm going to click save because I already know that I want it to be in my folder that I keep things in. Make this a bit bigger. Okay. Okay. We'll let that do its thing. Now, oops. I'll pop back over to Gig Performer. So here is our Kontakt. This sample is basically ready to go now. I can play this and I can use it anywhere that I want to use it. So there's a button here that says save. So I'm going to save it, and it's defaulting to my Native Instruments downloads, but I actually still carry around a hard drive with me, which we can debate whether or not that's actually a good idea. I've been swayed in a couple of different directions, but I'm going to come down here to SampleRobot Instruments, and I'm going to save this as looping pad live stream. And this is going to allow you to access this sound from any instance of Kontakt. So you're really no longer stuck in one place. You can bring sounds to and from anywhere that you want to go. Okay. Cool. So this has saved its samples now. And what's really nice is if you come over here to the export area, you'll notice that there are like a lot of different ways that you can export this information. And SXT, which is the file format that I would at one point have been able to bring things over into Kontakt in, is no longer supported. But you'll see here, it is supported for the NNXT propeller head, which is great. So again, SampleRobot, it's not leaving anything up to your imagination. It really wants to make sure that you get the stuff out the way that it needs to be brought out. So we'll click OK. It's going to ask you where you want to save it. And again, I'm going to go to my samples and we'll go into SampleRobot samples. Let's leave it like this. Okay. And that's it. It's done. So SampleRobot has done its job. Thank you, SampleRobot, for making this possible. Okay. So now let's pop over to Reason. I really love Reason. And the reason for that is, all puns intended there, friends, it gives you a lot of possibility, whether you're using it as a DAW or you're using it as an instrument. Okay, so this is the NNXT sampler. And in the NNXT sampler, this is a piano sample. We're going to get rid of this in just a moment. It really is just a list of your samples, and it has each of these parameters set up to different looping points. You can kind of see down here. It's probably not super large for you to view over the stream, but all of this information has been created for you by SampleRobot. So all of your work, in this case, if you're using a sampler like this, is actually done. And that's a really powerful thing. Now, remember, the list of export file types is very large. So if you're using machine or you're using any of the other ones that are listed there, all of the steps we took in Kontakt aren't really necessary, which is kind of cool. Okay, so let's see here. I always have to take a moment to do this correctly. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to go into our samples. We're going to go into SampleRobot instruments. Oh, it's not where it is. Sorry, friends. Samples. Okay, so you'll see that dark swarm is here, but I'm actually going to use this long looping pad from earlier because the samples are a bit more robust than what we did here. So I'm going to double click this long looping pad, and Reason is going to open that right away. So this is the piano. I'm going to just delete that. Give that a second to work. And then this pad is now going to have all of those settings already up and running. Sometimes Reason takes a moment, so we'll let it do its thing temporarily. Okay, so let's see here. We've got a couple of questions coming in. Yeah, so Mark has written in about trying to sample in Mainstage. So Mark, if you're still watching, I want to let you know that you can indeed, assuming you can hear my audio now. Does that sound correct? Sorry, friends. So let's go back to this question. So Michael just said, can you use this to take your hardware presets to Gig Performer? Let's say I have a Roland synth unit with 10 presets. Can I save them in an automated way? You can save them in a semi-automated way. So SampleRobot will allow you to do the same process so long as you are setting up your inputs and your outputs correctly. So an external synth would just need to be connected. MIDI would need to be able to come in, and then you'd be able to record it and bring it in. So you would need to do some hand holding of the actual software, but it wouldn't be as challenging as having to do it manually. So yeah, okay. And then I think Mark also lost my audio. So we'll do it one more time. If you have sounds in Mainstage and you want a dedicated version of the process of how to deal with Mainstage, then pop over to the blog that David wrote, because he actually goes through the settings for how to do it inside of Mainstage. Okay, we're gonna do reason one more time. So we were just having uh, some issues with reason, which has been a thing that I've experienced before. However, it's usually something I experience when I am setting things up, not so much when I am playing. So once it's kind of up and running, it's usually very trustworthy. Okay, sample robot instruments did that wrong again. We'll back up one more time. Okay, sample robot samples. Long looping pad. We'll exit this out. Delete this. Okay, so now let's test and see if this is working. I'll send this to you guys here in 5 and 6. Yeah. So what Reason has done, which is a really nice feature, is Reason has gone in and pulled in all of the looping that you need. So it really then becomes as easy as opening the file. And this sampler is going to give you all of the standard things. It's going to give you your regular amp envelope, which actually I'm going to turn this release up a bit. Yeah. So once you pull these things over, it really is now completely playable in any other format. So you no longer need to be worried about being boxed into a particular proprietary software, which is a serious concern that you could potentially have, right? If you're working in Mainstage or you're working in Ableton, or I mean, anything that comes with sounds that don't transfer over really well. The question is, if I ever need to move for some reason, will I be able to do it? Or even if you have a hardware synth you just don't want to bring with you to a gig, is there a way to get it out? And the answer is indeed yes. And SampleRobot is actually a fantastic way to go about doing that, because it gives you just a wealth of different ways to export these sounds, and it also walks you through the process in a really streamlined way. So even if you're not used to doing it, you have the ability to do it very, very easily. So if you have any questions, do feel free to pop them in the chat. But this has been the whole process from start to finish. Opening up SampleRobot, following the prompts, making sure to get your audio ins and outs set correctly. And then if you're using one of the supported samplers, you can just load the instrument and it's good to go. Otherwise, within Kontakt, you can set a loop range on an individual sample. And you can just move that over to your other samples and you're good to go. Michael wrote in, I want to say the more I learn about the software, the more I am blown away. Really amazing what you guys have developed. Thank you so much for writing that in, Michael. I really appreciate you taking the time to say that. Friends, we will be back next week. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you who are joining us day in and day out for this type of a thing. It's really great to have one meeting place where we can come together and we can talk about ways that you can improve your gig performer use and ultimately improve your live performance. So friends, thank you so much for being here. We'll see you next week, same time, same place.